Well, as we have been discussing, water is like gold for our body. So the idea is, how can our body keep the percentage of water inside around a stable percentage? Stability is like a key concept. Do you remember the word homeostasis? That is why the name of this unit was the tissue stability in our stars. Okay? Remember that we gain water from food that we eat and drinks that we drink, of course. And we lose water by evaporation from the lungs during breathing, or from the skin when we sweat, also by urination and defecation. So as we lose this water, the function of the kidneys is to keep the concentration of the body fluids. We know that between 70 to 90% of the weight of our body is water. If it is a very hot day and we sweat a lot, we lose some of this water. And if we lose more than we need, we can suffer dangerous dehydration. So, when we sweat a lot, our blood becomes too concentrated. This means that we need to save water, and not to lose some more through urine. So, more water will be reabsorbed from the renal tubules, and a small quantity of concentrated urine is produced. That's why when it is very hot and you sweat a lot, unless you drink some more water to compensate, your urine will be dark. But if it is cold or we drink a lot of water, we have an extra supply of water that we don't need. This turns our blood to dilute. So, what will happen is that less water will be absorbed back from the renal tubules, and our urine will be less concentrated. This means with light color. Okay? So, the idea here is that all the time our kidneys, in combination with the control of our brain, are trying to keep the level of water in the right percentage. Okay? Here you have two pictures in which you can see that when we drink too much water or it is very cold, the blood coming through the renal artery contains large amounts of water. Okay? So, inside the kidney and inside the collecting ducts, more water will be absorbed, so the blood that leaves will contain a normal amount of water, and the urine that comes out through the ureter to the bladder will be more dilute, lighter color. Okay? If we drink little water or it's very hot and we sweat a lot, blood that comes through the renal artery will contain little water. So in the collecting duct, less water will be absorbed for the blood leaving through the renal vein to have a normal amount of water, and the urine that escapes to the bladder will be more concentrated with a dark color. All these processes of keeping the water level constant are called osmoregulation. Okay? So the main function of the kidney is to keep the concentration of the body fluid. As we discussed in our classes, all along the circulatory system, there are nerve receptors that send the information to the brain about the concentration of the blood. if the brain receives information that the blood is too dilute, this means that the fluids are hypotonic, less water must be absorbed. But if the brain receives information that the blood is too concentrated, hypertonic, more water should be absorbed. In this case, this information stimulates the hypothalamus. This is one of the central structures of the brain where all the involuntary or reflex functions have their centers. For example, breathing. Do you remember? The first center is there in the hypothalamus. So when it is stimulated, hypothalamus stimulates the pituitary gland that is to the left, and this pituitary gland secretes ADH. This is a hormone that is called antidiuretic hormone. Okay, as you remember about secretion, secretion is the production of, in this case, a hormone in a certain organ that will be used in a remote and target organ. In this case, the ADH that is produced in the pituitary gland will act on the kidneys, forcing the kidney tubules to absorb more water. This means that if this hormone is in action, we will be producing more concentrated urine. As Sheldon taught us in a previous video, homeostasis is the maintenance of the internal environment between certain levels, okay? But the real thing is that when we talk about homeostasis, what we are talking is about the composition of the tissue fluid, its concentration, its acidity, its temperature. Yes, remember that tissue fluid is the tissue that surrounds the cells in the capillary beds, yes, in all the tissues. So the composition of this tissue fluid in the body is adjusted all the time to keep it steady. Stability of our tissue fluid is key, okay? Why is that? You know that tissue fluid supplies the cells with all the things they need. This means nutrients and oxygen, and tissue fluid also removes all the wasteful substances. So if this tissue fluid is too dilute, this means hypotonic, cells will start taking too much water, okay, by osmosis, of course, and the tissues will become swollen. We run the risk that these cells may burst. Do you remember that this happens to animal cells in a hypotonic substance, okay? But if the tissue fluid is too concentrated, it will withdraw water from the cells, also by osmosis, so the body will dehydrate. Kidneys are not alone in this function of controlling the internal environment. Yes, kidneys are in charge of removing the substances that might be poison for the enzymes. For example, urea, okay? Kidneys also control the level of salts, water, acids, drugs, spent hormones in the blood, okay? Another organ that contributes to homeostasis is the liver, okay? Liver regulates the level of glucose in the cells. Remember that the level of glucose affects terribly the brain cells, okay? Liver also regulates the level of amino acids. I will show you later how this level of glucose is controlled, okay? And another organs that contribute to homeostasis are the lungs, okay? Because they keep the concentration of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood, for the cells reactions to happen. Respiration, for example. Remember that all the cells need oxygen for cell respiration, and they produce carbon dioxide that must be expelled, because if not, it changes the acidity of the cell environment and the enzymes stop working. All these organs are controlled by the brain. Okay, people, the skin, the kidneys, the lungs, the endocrine system, the nervous system, all the sensory systems play their parts in maintaining the internal environment within the narrow limits. This was the definition of homeostasis. Remember? Let's see each organ and system in particular. In the case of skin, it is a homeostatic organ. Remember that the function of skin is maintaining the body temperature, our core temperature, between 35.8 and 36.6. As we are homeothermic, the price that we have to pay for this maintenance is that we have to ingest food. Remember that all our cells need a supply of oxygen and nutrients, and waste products from respiration in the cell, such as carbon dioxide, have to be removed because they, in the case of carbon dioxide, it can acidify the cytoplasm, denaturing enzymes, okay? To provide these oxygen and nutrients and to remove the waste products is that our cells are bathed by tissue fluid. Remember that tissue fluid is derived from the blood. It has more or less the same characteristics, but without the enormous size components like red blood cells and enormous proteins, for example. Okay? Remember that, for example, in the case of proteins, when they are in excess, they are deaminated in the liver, and the amino part is removed, and this amino part is very toxic for our cells. So this amino part is transformed in urea and taken through the blood to the kidneys, where it will be released as urine, okay? As we have been explaining previously. Okay, and the lungs keep the concentration of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood for all the for all the cells reactions like respiration. Lungs provide the oxygen for cell respiration, and they remove the carbon dioxide that is the waste product of cell respiration. Let's talk now about the function of a very important organ in our body, the pancreas, okay? It is located behind the stomach, as you can see, and its main function is to regulate the levels of glucose in the body. Remember that glucose levels are extremely important for the brain cells. Our brain works on glucose and water, okay? So, how does this work? Okay, the pancreas has got cells which produce digestive enzymes, yes? Do you remember this idea, pancreatic juice? Okay, but it also contains certain cells named alpha and beta cells that produce hormones, the insulin and the glucagon. Okay? If the glucose concentration of the blood rises, remember, the brain is informed about this, and the brain makes the beta cells release insulin. in the case of the glucose concentration in the blood falling down, when the brain is informed, it makes alpha cells to release glucagon. What is the function of these two hormones? Remember that in the case of insulin, it stimulates the liver and the muscles to remove excess glucose that is in the blood and to store it as glycogen. Yes, so insulin generates the storage of glucose. So glucose will not be floating in the blood and will not be available. Okay? In the case of glucagon, it stimulates the liver to convert the glycogen that is stored in the liver into glucose and then release it into the bloodstream. This means that glucagon makes glucose available for cell respiration, ergo energy. Okay? So, in this way, the concentration of glucose in the blood is kept within narrow limits. This is a picture of our brain, yes, and remember that this part is our involuntary brain, the brain that controls all the involuntary responses of our brain. Here you have the hypothalamus, where there are a lot of centers like thirst, temperature, hunger, breathing, etc. And here you have the pituitary gland. Well, the only thing I should add is that our body works based on negative feedback control. What does negative feedback mean? It means that our body is not prepared beforehand for what is going to happen. It reacts to the stimuli. What does this mean? That once the stimuli appear, our body generates an effect, a reaction that inhibits that stimuli. For example, if our levels of glucose are normal, they stay normal, the brain is informed, and no hormone is produced. But if the level of glucose in the blood increases, the brain is informed. Remember, it makes the pancreas to secrete insulin. And remember that insulin is a hormone that produces the liver and the muscle to absorb glucose and transform it into glycogen and store it, trying to lower the glucose level in the blood, okay? Trying to get back to normal, all right? The same happens if the levels of glucose decrease in the blood. The brain is informed, it sends a messenger to the pancreas receptors. Pancreas produce glucagon. This is a hormone that forces the liver to transform the glycogen in which glucose is stored and transform glycogen into glucose and release this glucose into the blood, trying to get the glucose level to normal, okay? So this negative feedback functions like this in a variety of processes, like blood pressure control, this glycemic control, muscle contraction, kidney absorption of water, etc. Yes, you see, the conditions, if the condition of the body changes, this means there is a change of temperature, concentration of water in the blood, concentration of sugar, or anything, this change is detected by the nervous receptors. The brain is informed, so the brain activates a mechanism to correct this change, the conditions return to the set point, and then these mechanisms are switched off. So we react to an action. Our bodies are not prepared beforehand. Well, I hope this topic is a bit clearer now. Go on studying, and tons of luck for tomorrow. See you!